Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
To the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder, and this podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. So the Sweet 16, first games happened yesterday, but I'm not going to necessarily recap those games because people can check that up online, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that the regular season in college basketball, and even just the regular season success of teams, doesn't always translate to success in the NCAA Tournament, and that the Pac-12 needs a lot more respect. The Pac-12 is definitely one of the top conferences in college basketball, and people looked at it this year and did not really give a whole lot of thought to it. And that makes a lot of sense because people are going to sit there and say, well, look at the Pac-12. They didn't have a lot of teams in the top 25. Only Colorado and USC were the only teams in the top 25. Colorado was a 5th seed in the NCAA Tournament. USC was a 6th seed. Let's look at that. Well, the Pac-12 is not really that good. Well, in the NCAA Tournament so far, the Pac-12 has been 10-1. That's right, 10-1. And that's not just rocket science why it's happening. It's because people are completely underestimating how good the Pac-12 conference is. And I wouldn't be surprised. I think a team like USC or Oregon can totally give Gonzaga a good game or beat Gonzaga. And you look at teams like Oregon State, you look at teams like Colorado in the first round, right? You look at teams like USC, Oregon, those kind of teams around the whole tournament. And it goes down to the fact that people just look at the teams that are hyped a lot in the regular season and that play in what they call great conferences. And I'm not saying the Big Ten and the Big 12 aren't good conferences, but if you look at what the Pac-12 had to endure and those teams that are doing well now, it's obvious that there's a big underestimation of how good these teams are, and that there's a little bit of an overrated component to these college basketball teams, in my opinion. Now, if you look at the NCAA tournament strictly, right, the Big Ten has one team that's competing in the Sweet 16. One. The Big 12 has one team that's going now to the Elite Eight. That's Baylor. And the thing is, you think about it, the Big 12 and the Big 10 were considered the best conferences in college basketball. Everyone was raving about them. Everyone's like, Illinois is going to get to the national championship. You're going to have Ohio State in the Elite Eight. You're going to have Michigan in the Sweet 16 or Elite Eight, or even the Final Four for some people. And even teams like Iowa, people are like, that team's going to be an Elite Eight team. And Ohio State lost in the first round. Illinois lost in the second round. Maryland lost in the second round. Who else can we go? Michigan State lost in the first four. Right, and everyone thought Michigan State was going to go, and who beat them? A Pac-12 team, UCLA, right? And the thing is, the way that this is happening is strictly due to style of play. And what people don't realize about this is that USC and Oregon had to go through different COVID pauses during the year. Oregon went through 3 COVID pauses during the year, and so did USC. They went through a COVID pause. And people are going to sit there and say, well, They should be able to come out of that okay. Well, the thing is, a lot of these teams have not, right? Because you have to get that chemistry down. You got to make sure your players are healthy. You got to make sure that they pass all their physicals. It's not just a simple thing saying, okay, since you have COVID pauses and you're 2 weeks out of that, you're going to be fine. I'm going to give you an example. Baylor. Baylor was definitely the number 2 or number 1 team in the country before the COVID pause. They come back and they look terrible in their Big 12 games. They don't look good at all. They lose to Oklahoma State in the semifinals of the Big 12 tournament. They lose to Kansas on the road by 10 points. They look horrible. And right now, they have looked like the best defensive team on the perimeter in the country as of this moment. From the perimeter, I'm not saying their big guys are the best, but I'm saying that they held Villanova to 51 points yesterday. And the thing is, COVID pauses make a big difference. Look at teams like Michigan, right? Michigan didn't come out and look really smooth against Wisconsin their first time back. If you look at even other teams that I can give you examples of, right? Villanova, right? When Villanova came back, they didn't look very good either. Right? Villanova, when they came back, had a bad loss at St. John's. Again, COVID pauses make a difference, especially if you have multiple of them during the year. It's hard to build team chemistry. It's hard to get everyone healthy. And if you look at Oregon, right, Oregon-style play, and it comes down simply to the fact that the Pac-12 has players and coaches that have a different style of play than teams in the Big Ten. The Big Ten predominantly comes down to one very solid big guy. I'm talking about the really good teams in the Big Ten. Iowa, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio State. Those teams went down to a couple of different facts, right? They came down to a very good big guy. Ohio State had E.J. Liddell. Illinois had Kofi Cockburn. Michigan has Hunter Dickinson. Iowa has Luka Garza, who might be the National Player of the Year. And then they have guards around them that are either dynamic guards or just shooters. But the thing is, look at Iowa, for example, right? Iowa has guys who are not the most athletic players. And Oregon is a very fast team that plays a little bit smaller, that has a lot of athletes, can shoot the three at a really high percentage, and now they're healthy. So the thing is, them beating Iowa by 15 points wasn't really a surprise because the fact is no one took the Pac-12 seriously. And when you don't take a conference seriously, you have a distorted perception of what they actually can do in the tournament. I think people legitimately looked at USC and said, okay, USC can be a really tough contender because they have Evan Mobley, who I've talked about before, is going to be a top 2-3 pick in the NBA draft. So if you have that player, you're going to be good. But the thing is, Oregon has guys in Emmanuel Amori and Will Richardson and LJ Figueroa. Right? These guys are athletic. These guys are good shooters. Emmanuel what he can do inside at 6'7", 6'6", he can guard fives, he can stretch the court, he can get by bigs, he's athletic. And the thing is with Oregon, though, is Dana Altman is a fantastic coach. Let's remember, right, he did coach Dylan Brooks and get that team to an Elite Eight Final Four appearance. And that's because he's one of the best coaches in college basketball. These guys have good coaches. UCLA has Mick Cronin, and why have they been successful? Because they have great size in the perimeter, because they are athletic, because they are a matchup issue for a lot of teams, because if you're bigger than them, they have guards who are and forwards who are quicker than you. And if you're smaller than them, they're too big on the perimeter, so it's going to be hard for you to score over them and contest their threes. So think about that, right? And then they look at like USC, for example, right? People are saying, oh, Kansas is a blue blood, they're going to get far. Kansas lost by 30 because they had no size to be able to deal with USC. USC is one of the biggest teams in the country. I think they're top two. I think they definitely have the biggest front line in the country. 7'1" Evan Mobley, 6'10" Isaiah Mobley. And then the thing is, too, is that they have guys like Drew Peterson, who's 6'8". And if you look at USC, too, what they do, right, is they threw different defenses. They threw zone, they threw man. And the thing is with them is that when they run their offense, you have to guard 2 to 3 different post players who are 6'9" to 7'1", who are all athletic and mobile. That's tough to guard. And it's all about matchups when it comes to the NCAA tournament. That's all it comes down to at the end of the day. And people underestimate the Pac-12 conference because, think about it, right? When you play basketball, if you play basketball in your life or you've watched basketball, a lot of times the teams that win, yes, it comes down to coaching schemes, comes down to talent, right? But it also comes down to matchups. The reason why Oregon beat a team like Iowa is because Iowa's not a very good defensive team. It's not athletic at all. Iowa's a very good shooting team. Joe Wieskamp's very athletic, but he's not. He's the only real athlete they have on that team. And Keegan Murray. I forgot about him too. But they don't really, outside of that, it's just a bunch of shooters and Luka Garza, who's incredibly skilled, but he's not athletic. And the thing is, the bigs on Oregon are athletic. Emmanuel Amori is a guy who can transfer from Rutgers, who can stretch the court, who can take bigs off the bounce, who's good in the post, good rebounder. Will Richardson was out, and he's a guy that can put up 19 to 20 points. LJ Figueroa, the same thing. So it's not rocket science that these guys are losing to these Pac-12 teams, that the Pac-12 has success. And it's why the Pac-12 needs to be taken more seriously. Just because you didn't have as much success as some of the other teams doesn't mean that your conference isn't good. Andy Enfield was the coach of the year for USC. USC just demolished Kansas. And Kansas was playing very well at the end of the season. It was because of matchups. And the thing is, it comes down to COVID pauses. When you have multiple COVID pauses, your team's not going to have the same chemistry or the same kind of continuity that other teams who haven't had COVID pauses would. It's just, again, if you have guys who are out for a while, just think about the fact of, let's think about it, right? If you have multiple players out, your best players, you haven't had a chance to practice because you don't have as many practices, you're not going to be as successful. And if you want to be successful at the level that you want to, that you're trying to reach, you got to have that level of continuity and chemistry because your coach needs to implement the scheme. You need to get that talent together. And Oregon and USC had issues with that during the year. Colorado had an incredible year, right? Because Colorado was mostly together and they had very talented players. Oregon State has figured it out at the end of the year because what Oregon State now has bought into their scheme and bought into each other. Wayne Tinkle's done a great job. And he had probably a more talented team last year when he had Ethan Thompson and his son, Trace Tinkle, who is going to be an overseas pro or possibly an NBA G League guy or could possibly play in the pros. But they bought into their scheme. Again, I've talked about upsets before, right? Oregon State's an anomaly when it comes to the Pac-12, but I think that they do represent a matchup issue. They were more athletic than Loyola Chicago yesterday, and that went down to the fact that they have more talented guys, and they bought into the scheme that the coach wanted to put together. And that's why they won. Loyola Chicago ran a great offense, but Loyola Chicago, again, didn't really know how to attack the zone very well because of the fact that the athleticism of Oregon State. And this is why, again, whoever wins the USC-Oregon game could give Gonzaga a tough game because they both present different matchup issues. USC presents a huge matchup issue because they're top 5 in the country in defensive efficiency. And they're also top 15 in offense now. And the thing is, they're huge. Their bigs are giant. And the thing is, against Gonzaga, because I think Gonzaga is going to beat Creighton today. But, I mean, I think Creighton could give them a good game. But the thing is, like, Gonzaga is everyone's favorite to win, right? And Gonzaga would be the team that one of these two teams would play. So from USC's perspective, the reason why I think that they could give them a game is predominantly due to the fact that you look at USC's size. You look at their athleticism on the perimeter. Gonzaga has Jalen Suggs, who's incredibly athletic. Corey Kispert is very athletic, but he's not a crazy creator. And I think against USC, you got to be able to create because they're not going to allow this guy just to catch and shoot. Now, Drew Timme might be an issue because he did do really well against a very athletic Oklahoma front line. But Oklahoma's not nearly as big or as long as USC. And I think that USC's defense could present a really big problem. Now, Oregon, on the other hand, could present a problem because Oregon plays really fast. I know Gonzaga plays very fast, but it could be a shootout. And Oregon can keep up in terms of points. And it's going to be a different matchup because Oregon is smaller, so they're not going to play as great a defense. Because, I mean, Luka Garza had 36 against Oregon. It wasn't like they could stop. They're not going to stop Drew Timme either. But they can compete offensively with Gonzaga because they have guys who can make shots from the perimeter. And Gonzaga is a good defensive team. But you saw guys like Austin Reeves from Oklahoma have success because they switch everything. And this is the one problem with switching everything. Even though Drew Timme is a very good athlete, and he is, he's a great player, great athlete. When you're going against guards who are very quick, who can shoot and drive, it's tough to guard that. I don't care who you are. And that's the thing the Pac-12 brings. Like I'm saying, they bring matchup problems for your squad. UCLA could totally win today too. And I think that if you look at what UCLA brings, they bring Mick Cronin, who's a fantastic coach. Fantastic coach. He was really good at Cincinnati. And he's done a good job here. They have size in the perimeter, which can match the size of Alabama. And Alabama's guards aren't really that big. Alabama's excellent defensively, and they like to get out and run. But UCLA can slow the pace down, and they have guys at every position who can score. Jaime Jaquez can score. Tiger Campbell can score. Jules Bernard can score. If you look at UCLA, too, they also have just they have guys who can just get it done, right? Cody Riley, he comes in and provides good minutes at the big position. And the thing is, what they do well, what they bring, is a difference in terms of their size. They have size in the perimeter, which, if you think about it, that's important. If you have size in the perimeter, you're going to be a successful team. And that's what the thing about this Pac-12 conference is. The Pac-12 conference has athleticism, they have NBA-level talent and good coaching, but the thing is they have a style of play and matchups that have worked well for them so far in the NCAA tournament. Oklahoma State was very reliant on their small guards. Well, Oregon State's a pretty big team. They have a 7'1", 260 guy in Silva, and they also have Ethan Thompson, who's a big guard, and they can match up between pack line man or zone. And it's all about matchups because Cade Cunningham is going to be the number one pick in the draft, and he struggled against them because the other guys in his team, while they do a very good job, they are not very big, and they couldn't get out and run their offense that way. And it goes down to the fact that, let's give some NBA examples to clarify my point about why I think that people need to start taking these teams a little bit more seriously. When we looked at the Los Angeles Clippers in 2020, everyone thought they were going to win the NBA championship. Not everyone, but the majority of people thought they were going to win the NBA championship because they had two of the best wing defenders in the league and two of the best stars in the league. They had really tough role player talent and in Marcus Morris and Ivica Zubac and Patrick Beverley and guys like Landry Shamet, Montrezl Harrell, Lou Williams. Again, they were stacked. But what did it come down to at the end of the day? They had a lot of their stars who didn't play together. The chemistry didn't work. And everyone overrated them, and they didn't completely live up to that hype. Like the Big Ten has not lived up to the hype of what they were in the regular season because every team played very similarly to each other. So you're basically playing against a very similar base style to how you practice. And then you go into the NCAA tournament, and you're playing against teams who have a very different style of play, like an Oregon, like a USC, like an Oral Roberts. And the Pac-12 was a team that had a lot of different base teams, right? USC was very big. Colorado shot a lot of threes. Oregon had inside-outside threats and could go small or could go big. And Oregon was a top 25 team at the beginning of the year. And they struggled with a lot of their COVID pauses. But look at how good they are now. They're in Sweet 16. And that's the point I'm trying to make to you guys, too. Let's just take a look at the Milwaukee Bucks. What everyone expected Milwaukee to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and win it. But they didn't do that because they went against teams that style of play didn't mesh well with theirs. Miami Heat had a very difficult defense for Giannis to go against. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that the Pac-12 should be considered as a much higher conference than it actually is considered because they're 10-1 in the NCAA tournament, because their style of play is difficult for teams to game plan against, and because they had to face a lot of adversity in order to get to where they are now. And that's just a point I try to make to a lot of people, is just that when you are implementing certain schemes, when you're looking at certain teams and you're saying, okay, well, this conference is by far the best conference. Well, again, Duke was considered the best basketball team in the country in 2019 with their talented guys. They lost to Michigan State because Michigan State's style of play and scheme didn't mold well with Duke. Loyola Chicago beat Illinois because of the style of play, right? Oregon. This is why the Pac-12 is a better conference than people think, because they have teams that can get the job done in terms of, especially this year, they have talented guys, but they also have different styles of play. Each team is very different. Oregon State's more of a kind of grind you out, get it to their best player in Ethan Thompson, and let him go to work. Right? They have athletes. Oregon is spread you out, make threes, attack the basket. UCLA is either they can play fast, play slow, but they have size in the perimeter, and their forwards are very mobile. They can take guys off the dribble and handle, pass, and shoot. USC is very big on the front line and very athletic, and their perimeter guards also are very big and can make plays. And they rely a lot on their defense in order to win games. And they have an NBA level guy in Evan Mobley that can get the job done for you. Again, it comes down to matchups, but also this is just a thing, right? Just because a team's doing incredibly well in the regular season doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win the national championship. It does not necessarily mean that. Now, Gonzaga could do that this year, and that's great, but I'm saying that just because a team is in a Power 5 conference and is not as known or as glamored as certain other teams in other Power 5 conferences doesn't necessarily mean they're not good. USC, Oregon, Colorado, Oregon State, UCLA are all very good teams. They just had, different paths to get here, and they have different ways of winning. Doesn't necessarily mean they're not good teams. And the point is, I want everyone to take the Pac-12 more seriously when it comes to basketball and not just look over them and saying, they're not that good. Well, they're 10-1 in the NCAA Tournament, so they are pretty good, in my opinion. They've been pretty good. They're the best conference so far in college basketball in terms of the NCAA Tournament. And they already have a team in the Elite Eight. They have a great chance to get 3 more teams to the Elite Eight today. 2 more teams to the Elite Eight today. If UCLA wins and the winner between USC and Oregon. So again, it's all about matchups. It's about taking people more seriously. And it's about not necessarily being so quick just to jump on the teams that may be overhyped. You got to look at the strengths and weaknesses of each team in order to make an actual determination of who really are the best teams in college basketball. Sometimes it's also just whoever has the best night on a certain day. Iowa, for example, is a very good team, but Iowa didn't match up very well with Oregon. I think everyone did not expect Kansas to get blown out like that, but Kansas didn't match up very well with USC, and that's why they got blown out. Oregon State had a great game plan to stop Oklahoma State and stop Loyola Chicago and beat Tennessee. They could score more than Tennessee. They could shut down the fast break points of Oklahoma State, and they are more athletic than a team like Loyola Chicago and were just more talented players. And UCLA has talented players that are now coming together and fitting Mick Croman's scheme, and they have size in the perimeter that can match up with any other team in the country. And USC is, there. So that's the point. Pac-12 needs to be taken a lot more seriously than it actually is. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, and when I come back, we're going to break down the LaMarcus Aldridge deal and how I think it's a high risk, high reward deal. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the Nets are going to win an NBA championship, but it's a chance for them to get to the right direction. Also, later on my show, I'm going to tell you guys why Chris Paul needs to be in the MVP conversation and why he's getting completely overlooked in this season's NBA games. All that stuff coming back up shortly.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder, and this podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. On my last segment, I talked about how people need to start taking the Pac-12 more seriously when it comes to college basketball. And that just because you look at the Big Ten and the Big 12 success this year and start to think those teams are going to be national championship favorites, doesn't necessarily always mean in reality that's what's going to happen, because you have to look at all the circumstances that go into a certain basketball season and for certain team successes during an actual regular season. And if you look at the Pac-12, they actually were way more successful than people thought because of the fact that they match up really well and cause a lot of problems for these Big Ten and Big 12 schools, as shown during this NCAA tournament. Also, check out later in my show as I tell you why Chris Paul should be an MVP candidate. And it should not be even disputed that he should be an MVP candidate. But on this segment, I'm going to talk about LaMarcus Aldridge going to the Brooklyn Nets. And the Brooklyn Nets seem to be getting everyone. And I don't know how they're doing it. I mean, look, they're doing it through the buyout market, but I don't know how these guys are just getting bought out and this is being able to happen. This is crazy to me. Blake Griffin, now LaMarcus Aldridge, guys who are former All-Stars. I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge is giving you pretty good stats for San Antonio when he was there. His last game was March 1st, but again, he's playing well this year. He's still averaging around 14 points a game. He's still shooting 46% from the floor and 36% from three. In 2019 through 2020, he averaged 18 points a game. It's not like the guy is done as an NBA player. It's not like he can't play. And everyone thought that when he got bought out by the Spurs, which basically means, as people who don't know what buying out means, that you surrender a certain amount of your contract to the team in order to become a free agent. That's basically what being bought out means. And now he's going to sign a veterans minimum deal to play with the Brooklyn Nets. And if you think about all that kind of stuff, it's crazy. It's crazy. Now they get LaMarcus Aldridge, who everyone thought he was going to be going to the Miami Heat. And now the Nets have a legitimate center who can score, who can play some defense, who can stretch the court too. And they just keep piling on more talent. Does this make him the championship favorite? I think everyone, if you talk to, absolutely. I think the thing is you have to be more skeptical about this, though. Because, again, he's old. He did have a major dip in his production this year, even though minutes-wise he had a dip in those minutes as well. And, again, I was skeptical about Blake Griffin at first, but he's playing very well. So I think that LaMarcus will give him a great lift. And the thing is, yeah, you should be skeptical about it, but to be honest, this is not looking good for any other team in the NBA. The fact that they're just getting these former All-Stars who can still play at a high level and just have these guys play 15 to 20 minutes and give you good production. LaMarcus should be starting for them if I were the coach. I think he should be starting. Because I think what he brings, compared to what DeAndre Jordan brings, is he actually brings an offensive component, and he also can stretch the court. And again, he's 6'11". He's strong. Again, he's a guy that if the other three guys need to throw the ball into someone in the starting lineup, they can just throw it into him. And then Joe Harris can just streak around and shoot his 7 threes a game, and it works out well. This is crazy. It's crazy because, I mean, look, the Lakers are looking to get and probably going to get Andre Drummond in the buyout market. They look like the front runners, and everyone is saying that the Lakers are most likely to get Andre Drummond, who fits great with the Lakers. But it goes down to the fact that, you have to start putting this product on paper. And I understand that Brooklyn's played decently well with Blake Griffin in the lineup, but I get that. But the point I'm trying to make is that they still don't have Kyrie back in the lineup yet because he's away for personal reasons. And again, he's done this a few times, and it's not necessarily the most ideal thing for the Nets not to have Kyrie in the lineup, but he'll be back at some point when he's ready to go. But Kevin Durant's the big thing, right? He needs to be there. And now you have to mesh all that talent together. I understand. People are looking at this saying this is a clear-cut, easy win to the NBA Finals. Okay, fine. But James Harden's not a guy who performs well in the playoffs. His numbers have dipped from his career regular season average is 25 points a game, and he dips to 23 points a game in the playoffs, and he dips 2 points lower in his three-point percentage, and his field goal percentage, he dips 3 points lower. So again, if you're looking at that, if James Harden's the guy that's leading you to the postseason championship, I don't feel very confident about that, even though he's playing unbelievable this year. And again, his style might work now. But I think they need KD, even if Kyrie's there. I think they need KD to win a championship because KD offers such a different, hard component for people to guard and to plan for. And you also have to figure out a way how to mesh this all together, right? LaMarcus Aldridge is a guy that you need to mesh into your system. Now, Blake Griffin seemed to figure that out, but Blake Griffin's only played with Kyrie and Harden. He hasn't played with Kevin Durant or LaMarcus Aldridge yet. Again, this is not, An All-Star game, it's one game. Now it's going to be a season. How are you going to mesh these different personalities? And I know LaMarcus has been a great teammate, and I'm not worried about his personality issues. But again, you have guys who want the ball in their hands. You have guys who, are they going to be willing to accept their role? Blake Griffin seems to be accepting his role, but how's Kevin Durant going to be fit in when he comes back? Is he just going to be the number one option, or is James Harden or Kyrie going to be the number one option? How's that all going to work? People don't overlook this. That's why, even though I think, oh, look, this is a great move for Brooklyn because you get a servable, very good center. He's a power forward most of his career, but now he's playing center because that's kind of the way the NBA went now. But the point I'm trying to make is that I'm a little bit skeptical about it, not because of the fact that I don't think LaMarcus Aldridge can play. And I think he can play. I think LaMarcus Aldridge is a very talented player. That's not why I'm sitting here saying, oh, I'm skeptical about it. It's because, again, it comes down to how are you going to mesh Kevin Durant, how are you going to mesh James Harden, and how are you going to mesh Kyrie with LaMarcus Aldridge, right? And Joe Harris is right now the best catch-and-shoot shooter in the league at the moment. And look, that's a credit to James Harden. He's willing to sacrifice. I'm not worried about if he's not going to continue his assist numbers. But, again, you're putting Kevin Durant, who was averaging 30 points a game before he got injured. And he hasn't been there for a while. And, again, this just seems a little bit like everyone is just giving in to the hype over just looking at how this team's going to be when they come back. When Kevin Durant comes back and they mesh well together, I will concede that they look like the championship favorites. I'll say that. And look, they should be the championship favorites out of the East, but I think people are still overlooking the Philadelphia 76ers, who just got George Hill, who I think is going to be a great veteran leader coming off the bench as a point guard that can run your offense, who can make threes, who's another floor spacer, who's experienced. Now, I get it, right? Brooklyn's got LaMarcus Aldridge, and everyone's saying this is unfair. They're getting all these star talent. Well, yeah, that's true, but you have to mesh that together. I always bring up the Clippers example when I bring up the Brooklyn Nets, and people probably are sitting there and saying they're not equatable. Yeah, they are. Brooklyn's much more talented than that Clippers team was last year, but that Clippers team was really dang talented, and everyone thought they were going to win the NBA championship. Everyone had them as the favorites. And what ended up happening? They lost because they didn't have chemistry, because they didn't play many games together as a full squad. Sound familiar? That's because it sounds a lot like the Brooklyn Nets. Brooklyn has had Kyrie and Harden, who've played a lot of games together, and that's turned out to be all right. But the problem I see in this argument is that if you look at Kyrie and Harden, they've worked well together because they played a bunch of games together. But the problem is, if you look at all these arguments that people are making in the future, it comes down to one simple fact. It comes down to, how is this team going to look up when they're at full strength? When they're at full strength, are they going to be able to get the job done from a chemistry standpoint? They have the talent to do it now. They have LaMarcus Aldridge, who now can guard different centers in the East, and he can stretch the court, and he can also score himself. And then you also have, Blake Griffin coming off the bench, who's now giving you 17 points like he did the other night against Detroit, and even having alley-oop dunks looking like the old Blake Griffin. And then you also have guys like Joe Harris, who can knock down threes better than any guy in the league at the moment. And you also have Harden and Kyrie, and then you're going to have Kevin Durant. From a talent standpoint, this team is going to be definitely the favorite. But the problem is, it comes down to, how can Steve Nash implement the right chemistry between all these pieces when they come back? You need to bring Kevin Durant back, because you can't just throw him in the playoffs and expect them to mold correctly and fit together. Because his numbers will not be the same when Durant comes back. They just won't be. He's not going to get as many shots. He's probably going to get more assists, but that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that LaMarcus Aldridge is a great get, right? I think if Miami could have gotten him, that would have been really great for them. He's a great get because he's a guy that can stretch the court. He can score very easily. And he's a guy that can fit into any team that needs him, right? I think he's a great fit. I do. I think he's a very good fit. And he's a guy that, look, if you play him for between 15 and 25 minutes, he can give you 14, 15 points. I mean, I think Brooklyn would take that any day of the week. At most teams, I think you would be dumb not to take LaMarcus Aldridge. But it comes down to the fact of why I'm still skeptical on Brooklyn. And it's not because I don't think they're not talented enough to win the East. I think from a talent standpoint, they are. But Harden's had a history of not great moments in the playoffs. And you don't have KD right now. So the problem is, I still sit there and say, this makes them better. Yes, absolutely, 100%. But I want to see what their team looks like when Kevin Durant comes back. That's the point I'm making. But what does LaMarcus bring to this team? Now, because I've seen very negative, but here's the positive angle of it, right? LaMarcus brings a center that can score. He brings a center that can rebound. He brings a center that can defend. But I think the big thing too is he's a huge offensive upgrade to Nick Claxton, who's been fantastic off the bench, blocking shots and rebounding and finishing lobs from James Harden on the break. Nick Claxton's been a great surprise for them. He really has, and I'm one to say that he has been a really big surprise. But I also look at the fact that, right, LaMarcus Aldridge, as I said before, shoots 36% from three, and last year he shot 38% from three. And even though he's 35, that's a huge option. In today's NBA, especially because it's really big on shooting threes, if you think about it, what LaMarcus brings is he brings a guy now to stretch five. That's really going to be tough. I mean, now Embiid's going to have to guard the actual center. With DeAndre Jordan, look, he gives you 10 points and 10 rebounds. And DeAndre Jordan's a good player, but he's not the DeAndre Jordan of the Los Angeles Clippers. He's still not that same player. Nick Claxton's not a huge threat if you give him the ball in the low post to go to work. LaMarcus Aldridge, if you throw him the ball in the post, he's a threat to easily go get a bucket. Do people just forget how good he was in Portland, where he torched Dwight Howard and James Harden in a 6-game series, when him and Damian Lillard absolutely torched them? Where they had to put Omer Asik on him because Dwight Howard couldn't guard him? People don't forget that, right? How good LaMarcus Aldridge was. He's a career 19.4 points a game guy and 8.2 rebounds. 8.3 rebounds. So I sit there and I'm saying, this is a great get, obviously. Obviously, this is a great get. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, the Nets are not, this is a bad move for the Nets. No, obviously, this is a very good move for the Nets. Obviously. But again, you have to figure out how the front court depth is going to work, right? Because you have DeAndre Jordan, who's been playing well in his limited minutes. Nick Claxton comes off the bench, and now he's been playing like an absolute monster. Blocking shots, running the floor. He's being a modern NBA big man. If you're not a shooter in the modern NBA, this is what Rudy Gobert has been so successful with. And Rudy Gobert does this better than, I think, most guys in the NBA. So when people are saying, oh, if you just rebound, play defense, and roll hard, you can make as much money as Rudy Gobert. No, he's very unique. Rudy Gobert is a unique shot blocker. He's unique. Okay, and Miles Turner, for example, is a 3-and-D guy. Very unique. But Nick Claxton's a guy that can block shots. He can rebound. He's not a guy that I would trust guarding Joel Embiid, though. LaMarcus Aldridge has got some more muscle to him. He's just another body you can throw at Joel Embiid. He's another body you can throw at Giannis Antetokounmpo or Brook Lopez. But the Bucks have been struggling recently, so I still don't really look at the Bucks as contenders. I don't. I think the Sixers and the Nets are the two best teams. And the Nets are still in that same position. This got them a step closer to being that championship favorite, but they got to put it together. I don't want people celebrating the Nets are going to win the championship without seeing the product on the court for at least 10 games or 15 games. I want to see what this whole team looks like together. Because the playoffs, the whole team is going to be together, hopefully. We know what LeBron and Anthony Davis will be when they come back, because LeBron's built great chemistry with these guys and Anthony Davis. And when they get Andre Drummond, LeBron will find a way to make him work. Because he gives him a pick and roll option. And actually, it works out really well because Andre Drummond is a guy that gives you like 17 and 12. So if he just gives you, let's say he gives you a little less than that in points, like 16 and 12, I would take it. The thing is, when I look at Brooklyn, though, Brooklyn keeps on getting better. Right? Sean Marks is making great moves in the deadline. And getting a guy like LaMarcus Aldridge is an upgrade even over Blake Griffin. Because he's playing better at this point in his career than Blake Griffin is. At least if you look at their statistics in Detroit, LaMarcus Aldridge is healthier more often. He's more reliable. And I think he brings up a... Now, look, you can put Blake Griffin as a small ball center if you need to do it, if you want to go small, which Brooklyn has shown they want to do at times. But I think now with LaMarcus, you can stay with him at the 5 because he can stretch the court. He shoots 36% from 3. Which is a pretty good percentage. It's like a little bit above average. And he shot 38% the year before this in 2019, 2020. So I look at this deal and I say, this is a good deal for Brooklyn. But it goes to that, and I'm going to harp on this. When I ever talk about NBA teams that are going to be championship contending teams, I always look at the teams and say, okay, how have they meshed well as a full squad? Not how's LeBron meshed with the role players? No. How's LeBron and Anthony Davis meshed well together with the whole role players? Will LeBron, Anthony Davis, and those role players have won championships? The majority of them have, at least. And then I also look at the fact of, okay, let's take another example, right? The Clippers, right, didn't play many games together, didn't mesh very well together, and they flamed down the playoffs. Blew a 3-1 lead because they didn't have the chemistry to close out games. Now, the Clippers seem to have that issue again this year, is that they're not very good at closing out games regardless. So the reason I compare them to the Nets is because the Nets haven't had Kevin Durant for more than 19 games this season. And Kevin Durant's also coming off, and I hate to say it, but he's coming off a catastrophic injury, and he has a hamstring injury. It's just concerning. And you're bringing LaMarcus Aldridge, a guy that can score and will want some touches, even though he's going to be asked to be more of a role player. And he's a guy that you need to mesh with Kevin Durant. You need to mesh with Harden and Kyrie and Joe Harris. Joe Harris, I think, can fit anywhere because Joe Harris can just run off pin downs and screens or fade to the corner and make threes. Joe Harris is the least guy I'm worried about with that lineup. But it's how the big three will work together, and then how you're going to incorporate LaMarcus Aldridge, how are you going to fit guys like Nick Claxton, DeAndre Jordan into that role. Because I think you should be playing Claxton off the bench as much as you can and having LaMarcus start. DeAndre can come in and spell some minutes, but you also need to play Jeff Green. And Jeff Green's been playing great this year, so how are you going to fit all these guys together? That's the point. You have so many talented pieces. Where are you going to fit everyone? Now, LaMarcus is going to play the 5, but what, are you going to put Jeff Green at the 3? You're going to put Jeff Green at the 4? Where are you going to put Blake Griffin then? That's the point I'm trying to make. That's the point. And whether that's fair or not, it's true. They have a lot of talented pieces, and it's worked for them so far, but they haven't had their full squad. And now you're bringing LaMarcus Aldridge in. How are you going to incorporate him into the fold? He's a great pickup. He's a great addition to your team if you can use him correctly. Because, his career averages of 19 and 8, I think anyone would take that. And he was averaging 14 and 5 this year in only 26 minutes. So I sit there and say, okay, well, he's a guy that can definitely make a difference for your team. But how are you going to fit that together? How are you going to fit the squad together? How are you going to do that? And you might think I'm crazy, but I don't think you can just throw out a talented squad on the court and tell them, okay, you got to go get the job done, go win a championship. You got to build some chemistry first. I think chemistry is still an essential thing in today's basketball, and especially in today's NBA. Because you have talented guys who want the ball in specific spots, who want to know where they fit in the offense. Also, defensively, Brooklyn's still not very good. They're 25th in defensive efficiency. So how are you going to fit LaMarcus Aldridge into that scheme, right? It's not like they're playing incredible defense. Even when they played what everyone called incredible defense the other night against Portland, they allowed 112 points. It wasn't like they actually played incredible defense. So let's dispel this notion that they're a great defensive team. But they have to incorporate these guys into the scheme and into the fold for them to be successful. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And whether that's fair, whether it's not, I think it's a fair point because chemistry, I think, is still essential to today's NBA. And when you have a talented team like this, when you haven't had Kevin Durant for many games this year, when you're bringing in a new guy who was a former superstar in LaMarcus Aldridge, who still can give you 14 and 5. And then when you also have guys like James Harden, who's playing great this year, but needs his touches, and you have Kyrie, who's a ball dominant guy, and Joe Harris needs to get his shots in the corner. And then you have Jeff Green and Blake Griffin, Nick Claxton, Landry Shamet. Think about all the guys I just named right there. They all need to find their role, and you're just bringing another guy into the fold. Now, you might look great on paper, but it's about how you're going to implement that team correctly on the court. That's going to help them win games. Now, they've been able to do that well with Blake Griffin, but you're adding another front court guy. So now you have to figure out that front court problem. I'm sure they'll figure it out, but again, I need to see that product on before I feel confident that they have figured it out. And not with just Harden there, not with just Kyrie, not with just both, with Kevin Durant back in the fold too. Because Kevin Durant is a monster offensively, and you need him to win a championship. You do. You need him to win a championship. Because Kevin Durant is one of the top two, he's, in my opinion, the second best player in the world, and you need him on the court. Even though Harden's been an MVP candidate, even though Kyrie's unbelievable, Kevin Durant is the solution. Because Harden has had problems of not performing as greatly in the playoffs. Kyrie's great, but his health is always a concern. And he's always in and out of the lineup. You need Kevin Durant because Kevin Durant's one of the most unstoppable players we've ever seen in the NBA. And he's just a matchup issue for any guy he's going to go against with his size and skill level. So at the end of the day, LaMarcus Aldridge, great addition. I need to see how all the pieces now are going to fit in. We'll see how this fits, but I think it's a good addition. But I need to see the full squad with Kevin Durant in the lineup. And that's just my opinion on this whole kind of deal. So I'm a little bit skeptical, even though I'm definitely optimistic about this deal being good. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but when I come back, we're going to break down the Aaron Gordan signing to the Denver Nuggets, as well as later on my show, I'm going to be breaking down why Chris Paul should be in the MVP conversation. All coming back up when we have the next segment of this show. Thank you.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder, and this podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. On my previous segment, I talked about the LaMarcus Aldridge signing to the Brooklyn Nets, how it's a very good deal for Brooklyn, but I'm also skeptical because I want to see the full squad in action before I make my whole decision on how this team is as a championship favorite. They should be listed as that, but I need to see the whole team to feel more confident about it. So Kevin Durant, get back soon. Sticking with the NBA, let's talk about the fact that Aaron Gordan now has made the Nuggets definitely a top 2 contender in the West. 100%. It's not just Aaron Gordan, though. It's the fact that JaVale McGee is there, too. The Clippers got Rajon Rondo, and everyone thinks that deal is going to turn them on the top because he's a leader and whatever, but I want to talk about the Aaron Gordan deal because I think this deal was a very significant one. But I think the fact they also got JaVale McGee, a guy with championship experience and being a great rim protector to come off the bench, this team is going to be, I think, in position to make the Western Conference Finals again and play, I think, the Lakers. But let's take a look at it. So Aaron Gordan has now signed with the Denver Nuggets, and in order to get him, they had to give up R.J. Hampton, Gary Harris, and a 2025 first-round pick for Aaron Gordan. And the reason why it came down was because Aaron Gordan was frustrated with the situation and losing, and he went to management and said, I don't like losing, and he was responsible for the losing. And basically the fact is they got him, gave up that, and then they got JaVale McGee for Isaiah Hartenstein and 2 future draft picks. And you look at all that stuff. Now, losing Gary Harris is a tough thing for them because Gary Harris was a good player, but his health was a big concern, and I understand why they got off of him because of his health. It was more because of that, I think. But let's just talk, break it down, right? Why does this make them a championship contender? Why does this make them, in my opinion, a top 2 team in the West, them and the Lakers? Well, they got better than Utah because now what they have is they have a guy that at least can match up with LeBron, can match up with Paul George, can match up with a guy like Luka if needed to be. Because Aaron Gordon is a freak athlete who's 6'8", who's offensively a pretty talented player as well. He's averaging 15 points a game this year, shooting a career high from 3 at 38%. And he's a guy that can attack the rim. He's a guy that can play the 3 or the 4 for you. And again, this is great because they get to keep Michael Porter Jr., who's been playing really well recently. They still have Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. Nikola Jokic right now is the front runner to win MVP. And again, you're bringing a guy who's going to give you 15 points a game. And if he fits that scheme and fits that role, it's a great move. It's a great move. My big thing, and the reason why I was skeptical at first, because I didn't realize how good of a defender Aaron Gordon is. Because offensively, there's a little bit of inconsistencies with him. Because it's based on the fact that he has never really been an exceptional perimeter shooter up until this year. But I think when I look at this from a totality standpoint, I think of the fact that Aaron Gordon brings a lot of athleticism to a team that's not super athletic. He brings defense to a team that's not great defensively. And he brings another scorer to a team that definitely, I think, can use a 4th scorer. Right? He and Michael Porter Jr. can be that 3rd or 4th option for you, and that's still good. And I think he's willing to buy into it. Because I think Aaron Gordon, wants to win, but we'll see how much he's willing to win. But from a talent standpoint, this team has gotten the job done from that end. Because especially when you play the Lakers, because I'm assuming the Lakers are going to be healthy and ready to go. If they end up playing the Lakers in the first round, I don't think they're going to win that series, unfortunately. I think Denver will figure this out. I think Denver will get up to at least the 3rd seed. I think. Because here's the thing about, if the Lakers get down to, let's say the 6th seed, right? They're probably going to play Phoenix or the Clippers in the 2nd round. And look, the thing is, the reason why the Nuggets needed to do this move, and the reason why I think it makes them a contender in the West, top 2 contender. When it first came out, I didn't originally think that because I didn't know how good of a defender Aaron Gordon was. But now I saw that they had him to really match up with LeBron. No, he's not going to be able to stop LeBron James. Let's first get that out of the way. He's not going to hit LeBron James at all. But you're not going to put like a Paul Millsap on LeBron or a Michael Porter Jr., which is a complete mismatch. What they have got now is a guy who's athletic enough to at least, make things difficult for LeBron. And also the fact is now they have a guy that can at least help them compete with the Lakers. They were good enough to get to the Western Conference Finals last year, but they couldn't compete with the Lakers. They lost in 5 games. LeBron demolished them. Anthony Davis played really well too. And if the Lakers are healthy, they at least have a team to say, okay, we can match up with the Lakers well. We have 4 guys who can score 15 points or more. We have a defender in Aaron Gordon who can guard LeBron James, right? We have now a guy that at least perimeter-wise we can put on Paul George and Kawhi Leonard because he's big enough and strong enough to at least guard those guys. Because Kawhi Leonard's 6'7", strong guy, right? Kawhi Leonard likes to get in the mid-post and post up guys and shoot his fadeaway. He likes to use his strength to get his step backs and shots off. Paul George is a guy that's 6'9", so having that size in the perimeter is going to be very helpful for them. Being able to at least contain those players if they get in a series with those teams. And that's why I think it makes them a contender. But it's not just him. If it was just him, I wouldn't be saying this. Because, look, he definitely gets them a lot better. It's a great move. But I think getting JaVale McGee is a sneaky, very good move. And getting JaVale McGee, so, like I said, they got him from Isaiah Hartenstein, who's a backup big, who is, look, he's a good player, but he's not JaVale McGee in terms of impact. And they had to give up 2 first-round draft picks, but it's not a big deal. if you're a contending team, draft picks don't mean as much. They don't. You want draft picks for building your team. If you already have a team built, you don't necessarily need a great draft picks coming in. So when I look at this deal, right, you have Aaron Gordan, who I just outlined detailed-wise, is a athletic player who can defend the perimeter and who give you 15 points a game and give you some versatility at the 3 or 4 spot. Can shoot the 3, get to the rim, all that kind of stuff. What JaVale McGee brings is a guy who has won 2 NBA championships. Actually, he's won 3 NBA championships. Excuse me, he's won 3. He's won 3 NBA championships. And he's done this as being a defensive anchor. A guy that can block shots. He's mobile enough to stay in front of forwards. So if you switch, it's not the end of the world. And the thing is, too, is what did he bring the Lakers last year? He brought a guy that could at least stop a guy like Jokic, right? Well, now you have a guy that you could put on Anthony Davis if you needed to be, right? You can have him guard Montrezl Harrell. You can have him stop a Serge Ibaka or a Ivica Zubac. You could have him contain a Gobert. Now you have him in that squad. Now you have Nikola Jokic starting. And then you can also play these guys together because Nikola Jokic is so skilled. You can play them together because JaVale McGee is not a huge post-up threat. He's a lob threat and a rebounder and a shot blocker. But from a defensive component, this is a great fit for them. Great fit. And I don't know why people always look down upon JaVale McGee. He's won 3 championships, basically fitting a very good role. He understands what he is. He understands he's a guy that can give you 7 to 8 points a night, 6 rebounds, and he'll give you between 1 and 2 blocks. That's a threat. You need a guy who's going to be able to block shots, especially in the West where the guards and forwards are so much better talent-wise. Think about it. The Clippers have Paul George, Kawhi Leonard. Paul George and Kawhi Leonard who can get to the rim and make things difficult on your defense. The Blazers have CJ McCollum. They have Norman Powell. They have Damian Lillard. You need guys that are going to be able to defend the rim against them. The Lakers have LeBron James. They have Anthony Davis. They have Dennis Schroeder. Guys who can get to the rim. You got to be able to have a shot blocker. Nikola Jokic, gets steals. He's not a great defender. That's not what he is. He's not an athlete. So you have JaVale McGee. You can block shots now. Even just looking down the line, right? Dallas, right? Dallas has Luka Doncic, who gets to the rim. You need a shot blocker to at least contain that. The reason why he's had success against teams like the Clippers is because the Clippers don't really have a shot blocker. Serge Ibaka is not really that shot blocker he once was. Zubac really isn't a shot blocker. And even looking at the fact that, let's take a look at even at Phoenix, right? Phoenix has Devin Booker and Chris Paul, guys who can get to the rim. You need shot blockers to contend that off. You need guys that are going to at least serve as a threat. Even to big guys, right? DeAndre Ayton or Gobert or Montrezl Harrell or Serge Ibaka, Kristaps Porzingis. You need guys that are at least going to give him a threat. You got to be like, okay, when I go to the rim, I got to, go up as strong as I can. But you got to at least be thinking about it. Especially because today's NBA is very open. It's spacing out more, right? And that's why I think they're a contender. Because now they have the defensive component. They brought back what they lost in Jeremy Grant, who's the star player now for the Detroit Pistons, and Mason Plumlee, who's doing a good job for them as well. Because what Mason Plumlee provided was slightly worse than what JaVale McGee provided. But an athletic big who can rim protect, run the floor, didn't need to do a whole lot offensively. And JaVale McGee, I think, is they're around the same offensive, but defensively, JaVale McGee, I think, is slightly better. Slightly better defensively. So again, you bring that, and then you have Aaron Gordan, who's stronger, so I think he's going to be able to defend perimeter guys better than what Jeremy Grant could do. And offensively, Jeremy Grant's probably a little bit better, but Aaron Gordon's is more physical, and he's stronger. I think he's slightly more athletic. So again, these are moves that for them they had to make. And everyone wants to talk about the Rajon Rondo deal to the Clippers. It's a good deal. I mean, look, they get a point guard that they desperately need. But I think the Nuggets did the best in the West. Now, the Lakers get Andre Drummond. That might be equal to that. But they got Aaron Gordan, who's a 15-point-a-game scorer, who's a guy who has star potential, who's a guy that provides the needs that you need defensively on the perimeter. And then you got JaVale McGee. And what JaVale McGee provides is a guy who's a champion, who's won with the Warriors twice, won the Lakers last year, and he won that by fitting his role really well. Early in his career, right, he was not fitting his role. He was trying to be a star player when he had athleticism, but didn't have the skill to get that done. But what he's got now is the idea that he understands that he has to be a great shot blocker. He has to be a rebounder and then a guy who can catch lobs and finish down low. Well, he's very good at that. So, again, he was playing well for the Cavs before he got put in the trade market. And it makes a lot of sense now. Because people, when we think about championship contenders, guys, all right, we think of a few things, right? You have to have defensive anchors. The Lakers, for example, right? They have Anthony Davis. They're going to probably get Andre Drummond, who can defend the paints. You got LeBron James on the perimeter and KCP on the perimeter that can stop guys. And Alex Caruso, guys like that. The Clippers have two great perimeter defenders, but the Clippers' problem is they don't really have a rim protector. The championship contenders, right, either have to be incredibly efficient offensively or have a mixture of both. The reason why the Lakers won a year ago is because they had great shot blockers in Dwight Howard and JaVale McGee. And then they had good offensive players in Anthony Davis and LeBron who could take over the game anytime they needed to. The Warriors, right? The Warriors had an incredible offense, but they also had JaVale McGee to rim protect. You need a rim protector. That's why the Clippers, in my opinion, that's still the thing they're missing. They don't really have a rim protector. Even with Serge Ibaka, they don't really have a rim protector. He's not quite the rim protector he once was. He's a little bit older now. He's not quite the rim protector he once was. When he was at OKC, was the best shot blocker in the league, and he's not that anymore. That's not really who he is. And what did the Nuggets get? They got a perimeter defender. Now they have an efficient offense because they have four guys who can get 15, but they at least have two star talent guys who can get 20. And then two other guys in Michael Porter Jr. who can get 20, and then Aaron Gordan get 15 to 20. Again, you don't really know what to expect, but they have an efficient offense. They've always had that. But they address their needs. Getting a perimeter defender and getting a shot blocker. And again, JaVale McGee has championship experience. That's what's crazy about this deal. And it's interesting, though, because offensively they got better, defensively they got better. And at first I was like, Aaron Gordan, like, is he really going to make them over the top? It's where they need him to play. I think if he buys in, they are a top 2 team in the West. Because I think Utah's a very good team, but I think now what Utah's missing is a perimeter defender to stop LeBron, to stop a Paul George, to stop a Kawhi. And Gobert can't stop Jokic at all. We saw that this year when he put up 47 on him. So I look at that and I say, okay, the Clippers have gotten better. The Nuggets have gotten exceptionally better because I think JaVale McGee adds a championship and defensive shot blocking component. I think Aaron Gordon provides a better offensive threat and a perimeter defender who can match up with LeBron, match up with the Kawhi and Paul George. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. If you want to win championships, you got to have the pieces to stop the teams that are championship contenders as well. And look, giving up guys like R.J. Hampton and first-round draft picks. Now, Gary Harris is a loss, but Gary Harris was never healthy. It's always, when Gary Harris gets healthy, they'll be good. How long did we have to wait in the bubble for him to get healthy? He hasn't really played many games this year either. And that's the point I'm trying to make here, is that while I am a Gary Harris fan, and I think he's going to do great in Orlando, the thing is, he's never healthy. Aaron Gordon's more reliable. Aaron Gordon fits the need of losing Jeremy Grant this year, I mean. And JaVale McGee fits the need of Mason Plumlee. So you have that pieces. Now you have Jokic, who can make any guy easily fit in that system because Jokic is such a great passer. And now you have four guys offensively who can get 15 to 20 points, right? You have two guys who can get 20 to 30, but you also have Porter Jr. who can explode at any time. You have Aaron Gordon who can exploit at any time. And you also now have a guy, because Michael Porter Jr. just isn't ready yet in his NBA career to become a legitimate defender. He's just too skinny. But you have Aaron Gordan, who's strong, who's athletic, can move his feet, and he's a guy that is a good defender. And he can match up with LeBron, right? And ultimately what you're preparing for, right, if you're any team, is who's going to be able to match up with LeBron James. The Clippers have the matchup with Kawhi and Paul George. The Jazz don't really have that, unfortunately. Like, Bogdanovich is not a guy, or Royce O'Neal are not guys I would want to put on LeBron James. Phoenix has Jay Crowder, who can not really match up with LeBron, to be honest with you. And then the Dallas, not really. Portland doesn't really have that. The Nuggets right now have the defensive component and the Clippers to stop them. Now, that's what makes the Nuggets, with that whole squad, could beat the Clippers last year. Because they have 2 stars, now they have 4 legitimate scorers. Because Jeremy Grant didn't get good at scoring until that Lakers series. And now look at what Jeremy Grant's doing. But I think Aaron Gordan is a better pickup because he has proven more offensive skill before he has come to Denver. And the fact that he's bigger. Because Jeremy Grant was skinny, so LeBron would just post him up and take him easily to score. Aaron Gordan is not going to just allow LeBron just to bully him. Now, LeBron probably will still bully him because LeBron's LeBron. But he's not going to let Kawhi Leonard bully him. He's not going to let Paul George. He's not going to let LeBron. Like, he's going to be a bigger defensive body to throw at those guys. And again, in the Western Conference, you need a perimeter defender that's going to be able to match up with LeBron. That's ultimately what it comes down to. Yes, you're preparing for Kawhi Leonard and Paul George because they're excellent players themselves. But LeBron is with Anthony Davis. We're the former champions. They're just coming off that finals victory. And LeBron is still the best player in the NBA. And ultimately, it's just, that's where it comes down to, is he's the best player in the NBA. You need to have guys to match up with him. For example, Brooklyn doesn't really have a guy who's going to match up with LeBron. Kevin Durant, I guess. But I'm saying, as they're currently constructed with their injuries, they have no one really to match up. And Philadelphia has Ben Simmons they can put on him. Right? Like, other teams are like, they're preparing. They're like, okay, we got to have guys to match up with LeBron because we know that he's going to try and he will be in contention for finals every year on any team he's on. So what Denver did, they got themselves in better shape because they developed that scheme properly to get them in good positions to win. And the thing is, when I look at that, I say, okay, they put themselves in positions to be a top 2 team in the West because you have Nikola Jokic, who is proven to be very good in the playoffs. Jamal Murray has been inconsistent this year, but he has proven to be well in the playoffs. That might just be one magical run. We'll see. But you also have Michael Porter Jr., who's evolving. You have Aaron Gordan, who can score, and now he's a defender. And I know that people are saying, well, you know, it's great that he's a defender and he's great at scoring, but are they really going to be a team like the Clippers or the Lakers? I think they're better than the Clippers. Beat them last year, and just because the Clippers got Rondo's been inconsistent. He's been good in the playoffs, but he's been inconsistent. I mean, when he was in Dallas, he wasn't that good. When he was in Atlanta, he wasn't that good. We'll see what they are. I mean, I think it's a good pickup for the Clippers because I think he's going to bring a point guard with leadership intangibles that'll be good for those guys. But I think the Nuggets won the Western Conference trade deadline because I think they got significantly better at the places they need to get better at. And even though I think Jeremy Grant's a superstar now or a star player now, it's just when he's with Denver, he's not providing the same asset going into that as Aaron Gordan is. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that Aaron Gordan will not be asked to do as much offensively, so he'll have more room to just be able to be more free offensively. And defensively, he will be asked to do more, and I think he'll be okay doing that because I think he wants to win a championship. If he wants to win a championship, he and JaVale McGee are great pickups. We all know JaVale McGee will want to win a championship, and JaVale McGee will buy in. And now he's back with his old town Denver Nuggets and with a chance to relive those championship glories that he lived with LeBron James and those guys. So, again, it's a great move, and I think it makes him a top 2 contender in the West with the Lakers. And I had the Clippers and Jazz right after them and the Suns. But that's where I ultimately go. I think it has really put them in that echelon there with the Lakers, and we'll see how it goes for them. We'll see how it actually molds all together. But that's how I kind of feel about it. We're going to take a quick commercial break here, but when I come back, we're going to talk about why Chris Paul should be an MVP candidate and why people are completely disrespecting how good he's doing this year. All that coming back up when we come back on the GSMC Basketball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Michael Schroeder, and on the last segment, I talked about why the Aaron Gordan and JaVale Mcgee deal to the Denver Nuggets makes them a top 2 contender in the Western Conference, with them and the Lakers going into this huge stretch run they had at the end of the year. But on this segment, let's think about it, right? We've been, you guys have probably heard from this network and heard from different platforms, the idea of the MVP this year and how so many names get thrown in there to the point that now it feels like there's like 500 people that can win the MVP race. Legitimately, it's guys like James Harden, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, LeBron, Damian Lillard, Giannis, guys like that, right? But I think a guy who should be in place for top 5 or a top 6 MVP candidate this year is Chris Paul. Chris Paul should be in that conversation. And when some people mentioned that before, and some people gave them they turned their heads a little bit, like what do you mean? Well, why should he be the MVP candidate? Giannis has better statistics than him, and his team's doing well. And Damian Lillard has better statistics, and his team's doing really well. And why should he be ahead of those guys? Well, I'm going by just the fact of so Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum are arguably probably a better backcourt than Devin Booker and Chris Paul at this point, right? But I think Chris Paul is a more impactful player than people give him credit for. Everywhere Chris Paul has went, he's won. He went to Houston, they became a Western Conference final team and almost beat the Warriors. He went to OKC a year ago. They went from being a rebuild to the 5th seed in the Western Conference and took the Rockets to 7 games. When he was with the Clippers, they were always a championship contender. When he was with New Orleans, they were always a playoff contender, always in the playoff picture. It's because he's a tough guy. It's because he understands the game. He understands how to get the most out of talent. And so, look, I understand. People are saying that he hasn't gotten along with a lot of people in the locker rooms. And yeah, because he demands a lot out of you. And Chris Paul his impact this year, I think, needs to be noticed. Last year, he should have been the MVP race, and I think he was, because that OKC team was not very talented compared to the other teams in the Western Conference. Phoenix was more talented than them. The Grizzlies were more talented than them. Portland was definitely more talented than them. And and OKC was the 5th seed in the West and almost beat the Houston Rockets, who were way more talented than OKC. And that's a Chris Paul effect. Now I'm going to break down the Phoenix Suns for you and why he should be that. Chris Paul should be in the MVP conversation because Phoenix, even though they had an 8-0 bubble run and have a great coach in Monty Williams, who now, if you gave him my top 5 coaches list, he would definitely be in the top 3, I would say. I think it'd be Thibodeau, him, and Quinn Snyder. I think you also have to put in like Doc Rivers in there because Doc Rivers has done a phenomenal job, and Greg Popovich, guys like that, right? So that would be my top 5 list for coaches now, because Monty Williams is, even though I didn't give him before, he's done an unbelievable job this year. And he's done a great job turning around Phoenix. But really go from a 10th seed to a 2nd seed with just Monty Williams as head coach of that same team? No, it's Chris Paul. Chris Paul has, now Monty Williams has gotten that team. I think they would be a playoff team with 7 or 8 with Monty Williams as the head coach, because he's a good coach. He understands how to get the talent. They would be between 6 and 8. They are the 2nd seed in the Western Conference right now. Everyone expected them to be 5th or 6th or in that Western Conference range. They're 2nd. They're the 2nd seed right now. And Chris Paul is averaging 16 points and a little under 9 assists a game. And the thing is, when I break down Chris Paul, and it's not the statistics that are the big thing, because whenever people think of MVPs, right? They sit there and they say, oh, well, Chris Paul doesn't have the statistics of a Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I assume is a winning record, or a Damian Lillard, or a Nikola Jokic, or a LeBron. Okay, I got that. But his statistics are good, and what he's doing for that team, they're winning games. And they're winning it in different ways, right? They have a very incredible defense. Last year, they were 16th in the NBA in defensive efficiency. This year, they're 5th. And what is Chris Paul known to be? A great point guard who can defend people, right? He's been in the tops in steals his entire career, and that's the effect he's had. He's got these guys to buy in and play defense. Also, let's just take a look at some other kind of things too. Phoenix is top 10 in offensive efficiency this year. Top 10, right? Now, I know they were a pretty good offensive team last year too, but they're 12th, right? They're 8th this year because they take more efficient shots because Chris Paul runs their offense very effectively. Him and DeAndre Ayton in that pick and roll has been very effective. And also, they were not in the playoffs last year. They had a great run in the bubble, but they were still 10th in the West. They were not in the playoffs. And they had talented players. I mean, they had Mikhail Bridges. The only guy they really added is they had Jay Crowder, who's a guy who's been in championship level situations, of course. But Jay Crowder's had stints where he's been up and down. Chris Paul has got these guys together. He's built a top 5 defense and a top 10 offense. That's championship level. If you have both of those things, you can win. And it's leadership, too. He comes in. Devin Booker's shooting a better percentage from the floor. He shot 48% last year. He's shooting almost 50% this year from the floor. Now, Devin Booker's points are down a little bit, but Devin Booker also got his first All-Star nod this year as well because they're winning. Chris Paul's an All-Star. It's because of his impact. And look at guys who've also emerged this year, too. Right? Mikhail Bridges has had the best season of his career at 13.5 points a game. DeAndre Ayton's playing well, too, this year. Now, he's not averaging as many points as he used to, but he's fitting that role very well and very nicely for this team. And it comes down to the fact of when an MVP means most valuable. Would the Suns be the same team without Chris Paul? No, they wouldn't. I think they would be jostling for the 7th or 8th seed in the West. They wouldn't be the 2nd seed. And that's Chris Paul, because Chris Paul knows how to get the most out of talent. I understand people have said he's ran into locker room issues in the past with James Harden, Blake Griffin. But he went to a team that was young in OKC, and what did they do? Oh, right, they got the job done. This team in Phoenix is very similar. They're a little bit more talented than that team last year in OKC, but very similar. And I don't necessarily see them as better than Denver or the Lakers or the Clippers right now, or even the Jazz, but they are a contender. Like, you have to take them seriously because of what Chris Paul has given this team. And the fact is, this team has an efficient offense and efficient defense because of, yes, number one, it is coaching by Monty Williams, but also it's the valuable presence of Chris Paul because Chris Paul has given them 9 assists a game. They didn't have a true great point guard last year. I mean, Devin Booker passed the ball at 6 assists a game, but they didn't really have a guy like Ricky Rubio is good, but he's not Chris Paul, right? It's a huge difference. It's like saying, okay, yeah, we got Aaron Gordan, then you bring in LeBron, right? Obviously, LeBron's better. Chris Paul's an all-time great point guard. He gets everyone better, and this is why this team's doing well, because he's had these guys bought into winning and bought into what Monty Williams wants them to do. And he understands how to play defense at a high level, how to get these guys who are younger, who haven't played great defense in their career, to get them up to a high level. And also, their offense is more efficient because he knows how to run the pick and roll to perfection. Again, valuable does not necessarily mean you have always had the best stats. It doesn't. And that's not always what being valuable means. Because, look, Russell Westbrook was incredibly valuable to that team because if he didn't average a triple-double, they never would have been in playoff contention. Never would have been. Right? They never would have been the 6th seed in the West. If Chris Paul was not on the Thunder last year, they would not have been the 5th seed in the West. That would not have happened. Like how Phoenix would not be the 2nd best team in the Western Conference in terms of record this year. And it's not just the fact that Phoenix, has talent and that, it's because Chris Paul has put that together. Chris Paul's valuable because he gives you good statistics and he gives you winning everywhere he's been. this is why LeBron James should have more than 4 MVP titles, because everywhere he's went to, they've become much better than what they were. Think about it, right? Cleveland was a disaster after he left. He comes back, they win a championship. Lakers, they were a disaster, and then he comes, brings Anthony Davis along, they win a championship. Yes, you need stars, but also think about it. OKC, right? They lost Paul George and Russell Westbrook. They look like a rebuild team. Like, for example, they have not been very good this year, right? They've been more rebuild. Okay, they bring him in 5th seed in the West. In the West, it's not the East I'm talking about either, right? Giannis is putting up incredible stats, and I got that. And guys like James Harden are putting up unbelievable stats. And James Harden deserves to be in the MVP conversation, deserves to be a front runner. I'm not saying that. But Chris Paul deserves to be in that conversation too, because Chris Paul is doing this in the Western Conference. He's getting these guys to buy into winning, and they are winning. They're the 2nd seed in the West, and these are young players who've never been in the playoffs or never been playing for anything meaningful besides last year in the bubble where they didn't even make the playoffs. So that's the point I'm trying to make to people, is that they're 30-14, and when I sit there, right, they have guys who they can rely upon, right? They have Jay Crowder, a guy, but again, it's Chris Paul understanding how to win, how to get there, how to get to at least a Western Conference semifinal or final. He's never been to an NBA Finals, and that's a knock against him in his career, but he knows how to win games. He knows how to get a team into positions to be a contender. Like, that's pretty obvious. That's pretty obvious. And also, I mean, look at them recently, right? They beat the shorthanded Lakers by 20. They beat the Miami Heat. They beat the Raptors. They've won the majority of the games recently. And look, they've lost some games that they could have won for sure, obviously. But it's Chris Paul. I mean, look at this. Like, he's had games against the Lakers where he had 10 assists, and he's just gotten the effect, right? He's gotten these guys in position. Like Dario Saric is having a good year because he's getting in good position because of Chris Paul. And it doesn't always go back to the fact of you have to have incredible stats to be the MVP. Did Steve Nash have incredible stats when he won the MVP 2 times in a row? No, he didn't. He did not. It's because they had an incredible record and an incredibly efficient offense. And that's the point I'm trying to make, is that this is why he should be in the MVP conversation, because they're the 2nd seed in the Western Conference. While the Eastern Conference is not bad, the Western Conference is not better. Sorry, the Eastern Conference is not better than the Western Conference. It's just not even like a conversation. The Western Conference is a different juggernaut, and it's just, that's the point I'm trying to make to people, is that, like, when he won MVP in 2004 to 2005, right? He averaged 15.5 points a game, Steve Nash. Chris Paul's averaging 16 points a game this year and 9 assists. Again, you don't have to have amazing statistics to be the MVP of the league. You don't have to be. You have to have good statistics, and you have to be on a team that has good efficiency numbers and are winning games. Nikola Jokic has a team that's definitely as talented as Phoenix, and he's playing unbelievable this year. They're 5th in the West. 5th in the West. Damian Lillard has CJ McCollum back, and I know he's carried the Blazers all year. They're a 6th seed. They're a 6th seed. Chris Paul, with that same kind of talented team last year, took the Thunder to a 5th seed. Because Chris Paul, whether or not people like his leadership style, he gets the most out of the talent if they are willing to buy into him. And that's the point. Like, look, James Harden built a great brand in Houston. They were better when Chris Paul was there. I think the best of James Harden's career was when Chris Paul was there. If Chris Paul didn't get injured in Game 5, who knows? They could have easily won that series against Golden State. That's the point I'm making to people, is that don't just count a guy out because his statistics aren't as good as some other guy. He's more worthy than Giannis. His team has a better record than Giannis' team. And that's just my opinion there. Look, Giannis is a 2-time MVP. He's amazing statistics, but Chris Paul's impacted winning more than what Giannis has done this year, and that's just my opinion. They're the 2nd seed in the West. They were 10th last year. And Jay Crowder had stints where he was really bad in Cleveland and stuff like that. And even in Utah, he wasn't that great. But he was great in Miami. He's doing very well now because of what Chris Paul, because they have, it's like Jimmy Butler, right? Jimmy Butler is able to impact winning because Jimmy Butler's a tough guy. He's a rough rider. He's a guy that can get the most out of the other guys because he demands perfection. Chris Paul is that same way, even to a more extent. Chris Paul has that kind of mentality of like what LeBron has. And it's probably why LeBron and him are such good friends. But Chris Paul impacts winning, and they're the second seed in the West. I don't want to hear this notion, oh, well, he's only averaging 16 points a game. He's averaging 9 assists. His team is second in the West. They're top 5 in defense and top 10 in offense. And he's gotten more production from guys like Dario Saric, guys like Frank Kaminsky, Mikhail Bridges having a career year, Devin Booker shooting better field goal percentages from the floor. I don't want to hear, oh, well, he only's averaging 16 points. I want to say, okay, yeah, those are good statistics for a point guard. He's an all-star, and what is their team doing? Oh, right, they're second in the Western Conference. Second in the Western Conference. Ahead of teams like the Clippers, ahead of teams like the Lakers. They beat the Lakers twice. They beat the Lakers when LeBron was there. And they beat the Lakers without AD or LeBron, but look, they've had some bad losses like every team. But you're telling me that Chris Paul should not be in the MVP conversation? Everywhere he's went, they win. Isn't MVP supposed to be most valuable to your team, not just greatest statistics of all time? I'm just saying, I think people are really overlooking the fact that Chris Paul should be in the MVP conversation. He should be. He should be in the MVP conversation. He should totally be in the MVP conversation. People just don't understand this at all. Because when you look at the West standings, right, they're only 3.5 games behind Utah for the number 1 seed. And they're ahead of teams like the Clippers, they're ahead of teams like the Lakers, they're ahead of teams like the Nuggets. The Eastern Conference, if they have basically an identical record to the number 1, they have a better record than Brooklyn. They have the same record as basically the same record as Philly. They have a better record than teams like Milwaukee. The 8th seed in the East is 22-24. The 8th seed in the Western Conference is 23-21. Put that in perspective. And the Suns are second in that conference. Ahead of teams, I'm going to read it again. Ahead of teams like the Trailblazers, ahead of teams like the Mavericks, ahead of teams like the Spurs, the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Clippers. The only team they're behind is the Utah Jazz. They're 30-14 this year. Why? Because of Chris Paul. Monty Williams, and then I think the MVP consideration of Chris Paul, because he's really gotten this team to buy in. It's true. I don't want to hear this fact, oh no, he's not having these great statistics, so he shouldn't be considered. Oh no, he should be considered. He should be considered. I'm going to be the one that he should be considered. He should be considered. Mikhail Bridges, career year, right? Dario Saric is playing well this year. 10 points a game for Dario Saric. I'll take that off the bench. Frank Kaminsky's playing pretty well this year too. And look, he's not playing as many minutes, but he's not playing poorly. He's shooting better field goal percentages from 2-point range and 3-point range than he did a year ago, when he played a lot more minutes, obviously, but he only plays 15 minutes a game this year, and he's giving you 7 points a game, basically. Mikhail Bridges gives you 13.5 points a game. He's not just a defender. And that's who Phoenix has. And then Jay Crowder is playing pretty well, too, this year, right? Jay Crowder is not... He's averaging 10 points a game, right? Shooting better from 3 than he had as opposed to the most of his career. And is that the major effect? Oh, yeah. Now, Miami, Jay Crowder was very, very good. But shooting 38% from 3, I mean, I'll take that. Devin Booker shooting better percentages. Frank Kaminsky, Dario Saric, Mikhail Bridges. That's Chris Paul. He's getting the best out of these guys. He's getting these guys to buy into Monty Williams. Yeah, Chris Paul's, the president of the Players Association, right? He's a leader. And the thing is, when I look at Chris Paul, He's an all-star that doesn't have the most glamoring stats, but he gets the job done. He wins. You don't think any team in the NBA would want Chris Paul on their team because they know they're going to win with him. Maybe not win a championship, but they're going to be in positions to be able to compete for one. OKC took a really not highly talented OKC team last year. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Danilo Gallinari. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is very good. Danilo Gallinari is a good player too. That team with Chris Paul challenges James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker to 7 games. And this year, they have the second seed in the entire Western Conference. Better record than a team like Brooklyn. Almost an identical record to the 76ers. They would be, right now, the second seed in the Eastern Conference as well. Probably tied for first. That just shows you how good Chris Paul's been for this team. This team was 10th in the West last year. I'm going to repeat that fact again because people need to understand this. They were 10th in the West, even with an 8-0 bubble record. Chris Paul's taken that team and made them a second seed in the West. Don't just look at statistics, guys. Don't just say statistics make the MVP. That's not true. It's not how it is. That's not how it works. James Harden has had, unbelievable career, NBA history, time stats. Okay. His team doesn't have a better record than Chris Paul. James Harden's probably more worthy because James Harden's built that team to win games more. But Chris Paul should be top 5 in the MVP conversation. I don't care what anyone says. He should totally be top 5 in the MVP conversation. Just because Russell Westbrook had a triple-double and had unbelievable stats, and just because Giannis has unbelievable stats, look at the team record, look at the impact on winning, look at what they were last year and what they are this year, and come back to me and tell me if you disagree. Chris Paul should be a top 5 MVP candidate. He should be. He's playing unbelievable this season. And his team is winning. That's the important thing to realize, guys, is that he's winning games. He's getting this team to a second seed in the West. If they played today, they would be the second seed in the Western Conference. And a legitimate threat in the West. People need to start taking them seriously. Because of the fact that he's got this team to being a winning team and a team that can compete for a championship. They can totally compete for a championship. I like him better than Milwaukee. And this is also in the Western Conference, the tougher conference, right? And that's what you guys got to look at the end of the day. When you look at top 5 MVP candidates, put Chris Paul's name in there. Well, that's going to wrap up the show. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us on the different platforms you listen to podcasts on, as well as like our pages on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you and have a good day. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Michael.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.